Good evening, intuitives, and thank you to all the new subscribers to the channel and all of you that continue to, give me views for some reason. I hope my videos help you in some way, and if they do, please feel free to pass them along to others who they may help too, because that's why this channel exists. If I had to describe it in a nutshell, it's to try to help people better understand themselves and better understand things like narcissistic abuse, so you either no longer have to suffer the horrible status quo you're in, or, perhaps if you're younger, you can avoid some of the things that I had to endure in my younger days. And we can hopefully make the world a better place. Also, if you watch this channel and you haven't subscribed, please do. That'll help the algorithm, because if you find the videos helpful, you can help make me a lesser nobody, perhaps. Maybe I can get to that 1,000 mark, and the algorithm might throw me a bone every once in a year or two. So this video is going to be the start of basically a new series. I'll create a playlist eventually, and it's about historical figures who have influenced my life, people I admire. And all of these people I'm going to do in videos like this will be deceased people, because the people that I admire who are still alive, their story is not finished yet, and they are perfectly capable of telling their own stories far better than some random nobody INFJ on YouTube. So I'm going to start this with somebody I have admired since childhood, my favorite Egyptian pharaoh, the renegade pharaoh himself, who there is some circumstantial evidence that he could have been an INFJ, so this is kind of an overlap video into the whole INFJ theme, and that is the one and only Pharaoh Akhenaten. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with Akhenaten, I'm going to give a little bit of his background, but this is mainly going to be about why I admire him. It's not going to be like a biographical video. There's plenty of those out there. And plus, the books that I've read on Akhenaten, I have not read in a while. Yes, I did study archaeology for a year at the University of Toronto, but that was 2007, 2008, so it's been a minute or two. And, things fade, even in my brain from time to time. So, this is going to mainly be about why I admire Pharaoh Akhenaten, more so than it's going to be Akhenaten did this time and this time. So the Pharaoh Akhenaten, he's most known for being the father of the boy king Tutankhamun. Akhenaten was born into the Egyptian royal family. This is during the New Kingdom period of Egypt, which often not as studied as much as the Old Kingdom, although we have far more artifacts, but, Old Kingdom's got the pyramids. Always wanted to go there, and ironically enough, the Great Pyramid isn't what draws me. I'm, for some reason, drawn to the Red Pyramid more, Pharaoh Sneferu, yeah, it's Saqqara, but anyway, because it's the first true pyramid, because the bent pyramid is bent, and then the step pyramid of Djoser is, a transitional phase. It more resembles the pyramids in Mesoamerica, which I have visited and climbed the ones in Cova, which is way cooler than Chichen Itza because it hasn't been cleared and made into a tourist trap, and it's, at least in the late 90s, it was hard to get access to, but I befriended some archaeologists and got to go as like a little junior archaeologist instead of a tourist, and it was like awesome. I drug my dad through those jungles for hours, like Lisa Simpson does to Homer. But enough about my childhood and how I'm, was the male Lisa Simpson as a child. Back to Akhenaten. So Akhenaten, he's royal. And interestingly enough, and one of the reasons why I relate to him is he was, as depicted in the artwork at the time when he was a child, smaller than the other members of his family. So he was clearly, the black sheep, the outcast of his family, like me, because my family views Chester County as the whole world, and my narcissistic aunt as some kind of queen and authority figure, and again, Chestertology, its own video. So, Akhenaten, black sheep, they never thought he'd be pharaoh. Things and circumstances happen that places him, as the Pharaoh of Egypt. And for those of you that don't know, being Pharaoh is way better than being king, because not only are you king as the Pharaoh, you are also considered the head of the Egyptian religion and a living god. Oh, yes, a living god and king. Doesn't get more powerful than that. So, outcast Akhenaten, who was clearly, if not INFJ, certainly introverted, and was also rumored to have Marfan syndrome, but that may be artistic interpretation by the art style of the Amarna period, which differs from the rest of ancient Egyptian art, as does a lot of things from Akhenaten's reign, which we're going to get to right now. So, the outcast introvert was able to marry out of his league, and oh yes, I admire that. He married Nefertiti, who was said to be, one of the most beautiful women of Egyptian history, perhaps only rivaled by Cleopatra. Okay, doing good so far. You're the pharaoh. You got your dream girl who's out of your league, and Nefertiti was very said to be very charismatic, very beloved by the Egyptian people. I assume she was an extrovert of some sort. I like to believe either ENFP or ENFJ, because we got a INFJ pharaoh, and those two tended to work well together. So one of the first things he did when he ascended as pharaoh was to change one of many traditions, because another point why I think he was an INFJ, basically said, fuck tradition, this is corrupt, I'm in charge, and I'm going to change it. Deal with it. We're going to make the world a better place, because that's what INFJs do, or try to do, certainly try to do if we're able to obtain power, especially at that level. So, before, queens really didn't have a lot to say. Akhenaten's like, nah, we're going to change that. And, sadly, one thing I don't like about him is he had other wives. Nefertiti was his queen and his main wife, but he had minor wives too, including Tutankhamun's mother. But, I guess he wasn't demisexual, or that was just the culture of the Bronze Age. I wasn't there, so I don't really know. All right, so he changed the rules when it came to Nefertiti. He basically said, like, yep, she's my co-regent, so she has just as much power as I do and just as much say as I do in every aspect of ruling Egypt except one thing, and that one thing was the military. And, that's because he had military training and she didn't, because they didn't let girls have military training back then. Don't agree with that, but, that's how they rolled back then, and there's still similar rules about that today in most countries. Ironically enough, a little side note, that women now, from what I've read, are allowed to test for the U.S. Navy SEALs. Now, there is yet to be a female who was able to pass the prerequisite test to get into BUDS training, basic underwater demolition / SEAL. But perhaps there will be in short course. Only time will tell. There is a trans SEAL. Well, he retired and then transitioned, so I guess it would be a former SEAL. Read his book Warrior Princess. It's a pretty interesting read from a hardened combat veteran, and yet his emotional struggles, because you don't expect SEALs to struggle emotionally, because they're arguably the most badass people on the planet, along with Marine Recon, Green Berets, and yeah, I'll give them their props too, the British SAS. So, Akhenaten has his co-regent Nefertiti, and this is working well for him, because not only is he like head over heels in love with her, she's a much better ruler than him, because she's an extrovert and the people love her, and he's an introvert and grew up as the black sheep of his family. He's an outcast. So Akhenaten felt neglected by the Egyptian religion, the traditional one, because, the god was Horus and Osiris and Isis and Thoth and Seth, and Anubis didn't answer his prayers. So he became devoted to an existing god in the Egyptian pantheon, but a minor and often nearly forgotten god called the Aten, or the sun disk. I'm liking this guy more and more. Didn't roll with the predominant religion of his era and chose to worship a nearly forgotten god. Remind you of a certain other outcast devoted to the goddess Diana, who's, not that well known anymore, although she was one of the only surviving goddesses to be worshipped after the fall of Rome. Diana will get her own video if I can ever do it good enough where I have the balls to publish it because, kind of my girl there. Anyway, he becomes devoted to the Aten and he believes that the sun disk answers his prayers and he has, connection to them. So, also at the time, the high priests of the Egyptian religion were very corrupt. So he decides he's going to reform that, much like the feminist pope, who also get his own video, Albino Luciani, who went against the corrupt Vatican Bank and the corruption within the College of Cardinals. And that'll be an interesting video. Yes, there's a pope I admire, and yes, he was said to be a feminist, and yes, he even referred to God as she. So there's rumors that he was a witch. Maybe he was. We'll find out soon. So Akhenaten's like, no, we're going to close these temples because you guys are all corrupt. My people are starving. You're corrupt. You're gilding yourselves in gold. And, we're going to worship the Aten, my God, who will help make Egypt a better place. And we're going to usher in a new golden era. So he also moves the capital from Thebes and built a new city in Amarna, which lay in ruins today, a forgotten city. And he closes all the temples of the traditional gods and only allows worship of the Aten. Now, some would say, wow, Akhenaten, he's a monotheist. No, he's not. I mean, yes, he says only the Aten. He's a henotheist for the reason that he still retained that he himself was a living God. Because I mean, come on, if you got some, people believe in something that sweet, why would you give that up? Just ask well, L. Ron Hubbard's dead, and he also worshipped Diana. Coincidence, I assure you. Or am I L. Ron Hubbard reborn? Joke, probably. So Akhenaten now has his new capital. He's got his dream girl as his wife and his queen. The people love her. They really don't like this, him, saying fuck you to the status quo, even though it is said from records at the time that, the average Egyptian was better fed back then. But, centuries of indoctrination that you have to believe in certain gods and that suffering makes you stronger kind of led people not to like Akhenaten too much. And, his queen could only cover for him so long. So, his reign went like that. He was often contested. Of course, the deposed, very powerful Egyptian priests of the traditional Egyptian religion were not too happy with him. And they're like, we got to kill this guy. We got to kill this guy. We had it good, and now we don't. It would be like if today a president of the United States said, okay, that's it, lobbyists, you're done. You don't have any power anymore, money out of politics. It's like, yeah, he nice knowing you, bye. Unless you install someone as vice president who's even more of a danger to them. That's why you should all elect me as president and elect like Jesse Ventura as my vice president. Yeah, because they would certainly be more afraid of him than me. Nobody knows who I am. Yeah, But politically, I'm essentially Kyle Kalinske with a pentacle, which makes me cooler and I'm prettier. So Akhenaten's reign ends with his death. His son Tutankhamun ascends after him. His birth name, by the way, was Tukhenaten. It was derivative of his father's, but he changed it to resemble the traditional Egyptian gods. Akhenaten's birth name was not Akhenaten. I believe it was Tutmosis IV, Tutmosis something. It's been a while. But he changed it to reflect his god, the sun disk, the Aten. And in Amarna, the Aten was prominently displayed. He and his family were prominently displayed worshiping it. Nefertiti was displayed as the same size as him in the artwork, which was a big deal. That was kind of a big no-no, but he didn't care. So it makes him so cool. But after the boy king, Tutankhamun, comes to power, and he has regents and people controlling him. I forget his name, but anyway, it's not important right now. He goes back, reopens the temples, undoes basically all the reforms that his father did. People stop worshiping the Aten, at least publicly. Perhaps there were some of those that did like the rebel king and kept worshiping the Aten, but Amarna, Akhenaten's new capital city, abandoned. And to add insult to injury, because the priests can't have that. It's like this guy actually took our power away for a time. So future kings can remember this guy Akhenaten and be like, these motherfuckers are corrupt. We're gonna pull an Akhenaten and change this shit. To prevent that, they tried their best to erase his name from history. His sarcophagus was defaced. His cartouche, which said his name on a sarcophagus, was removed. Artwork depicting him was removed. They, tried to erase the memory of, rebel Pharaoh who tried to fix a corrupt status quo and make Egypt a better place and, possibly the beginnings of making women more equal, or at least for his wife anyway. But no, can't have that. So Akhenaten was largely forgotten, other than being Tutankhamun's father and the previous regent. Over the years, things have been known about him. Some artifacts have been found, all of them defaced. So, given that Akhenaten was probably an INFJ, at least there's circumstantial evidence to that, was such a rebel, and dared to question the status quo of his day, and dared to do it in the face of danger, and simply wanted to make the world around him a better place with the power he had, and had the balls to say that his wife was equal to him, because that's something I would do. Hell, I'd be like, you rule. You're the queen. I'll be the prince consort. You're better at this than me. I'm good. Not a big stretch for a guy who worships a female god. So, you know, because of these various things, I've known of Akhenaten since I was about 6. Over the years, the more I found out about him, the more I admired him. That's how he became my favorite Egyptian pharaoh. It's questionable whether or not we found his mummy. They say they have one that might be him, some DNA test. It's inconclusive. So we may or may not have the remains of the rebel pharaoh. But I find him as a very interesting character, even if you're like, you fucked this video up and didn't do it right. Yeah. But nonetheless, you have to admit, if nothing else, Akhenaten is an interesting guy and certainly the most unique of all Egyptian pharaohs. So I hope that was informative or at least entertaining. If you watch my videos, you know I sidetrack. It's part of my style, although I don't do it on purpose. So, you know, I suggest you look into some professionally made videos on Pharaoh Akhenaten. It's a very interesting story, and to me, he's a very admirable guy. Certainly, given the time period in which he lived in and the things he tried to do and what he was able to change, at least for a period of time, in the face of many powerful people trying to destroy him. But yet he did it, and that I admire. One can only imagine what the trajectory of the new kingdom of Egypt would have been had his changes not been undone by his son. Perhaps if his son wasn't so young and easily influenced when he became pharaoh and died soon after himself, only a few years. One can only imagine what Egypt would have progressed as then. Would worship of the Aten still exist to today? Hell, if Rome never fell, would far more people be aware of who the goddess Diana is? Interesting things that INFJ minds tend to wonder about. But that's my favorite pharaoh. So now, if you've never heard of him before and you're an INFJ, you're like, hey, one of us was pharaoh of Egypt, probably. Well, I'll see you next time.